Today I'm going to show you how to create some very basic formulas in Excel. You can see that I have labels over here to the side indicating that I want to create a total, I want the average, and I want to find the maximum value of a particular range and the minimum value of a particular range. So we only have 4 rows that we're working with. They're listed here. So we're just going to get started. In cell B8, I click, I go up to my auto sum, I'm going to choose sum, and it selects the correct range, which is B4 to B7. Now that I've observed that the range is correct, I'm going to press enter. Now in cell B9, I want to figure out the average of this range right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in cell B9, I'm going to go up to auto sum, I'm going to choose average, and this time it didn't select the correct range for me. It selected B4 to B8. I only want B4 to B7. So I'm going to click in cell B4, drag it down to B7, and that has corrected that little mistake there. The other option is to come right here and just correct it here. Just press enter, and now I'm in cell B10, and I want to figure out what is the maximum number in this range that I have selected there. So to do that, I'm going to click in cell B10, I'm going to go up to the auto sum, I'm going to choose max, and again, it didn't select the correct range for me, so I'm going to take my mouse and just drag over the correct range, and then I'm going to press enter. In cell B11, I want the minimum number of this range here, so what I'm going to do is click in cell B11, I'm going to go up to the auto sum, I'm going to choose min for minimum, and then I'm going to again select the correct range and press enter. Now once I have my formulas created, I can autofill those formulas over into these cells here. It would be a waste of time to recreate the formulas in each and every cell. So Excel has a way for us to autofill, and you can just click on the cell, you go into the lower right corner of the cell, and you can autofill over. Now when you do that, you click on each individual cell and you look up here in the formula bar to see that it did in fact pick up the relative reference. Now what that means is, when I created the formula here in cell B8, what happened is the cell reference said, hey, look at 1, 2, 3, 4 cells above and add those cells. So when I copy it over one, it's simply doing the same thing. It's like a little copycat. It's going to look up and add 1, 2, 3, 4 cells, and it's going to tell me what that number is, and so on and so forth. So that's what that means by picking up the relative reference. It basically looks at the formula and says, hey, which cells are you looking at? And when you copy it over, it looks at the same cells but one column over. So I showed you that you could click here, go to the autofill, and you can autofill over. You can do several formulas at the same time. So I have B9 to B11 selected. I'm going to go to the autofill. I'm going to click and drag over, and now you can see that every single one of these cells, if you click on the cell, click in the formula bar, you can see that they also pick up the relative range. Okay. Now in cell F4, you can see the label in F3 is a total label, so we want to add the contents here from B4 to E4. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and show you your auto sum, but you could hand type this in. You would just type equal sum, left parenthesis, B4 colon E4 right parenthesis, and that would be your formula. You could also use this guy right here. It's called insert function. You'd be able to click on it, you'd be able to go to sum, and then you click OK, and then you can type in the range that you want to add, And you can see that it already knows that we want B4 to E4. So we're going to say, okay. So again, once you have your formula in there, you can just autofill it down. I'm going to go down to cell F7. Awesome possum. Now, over in cell H4, we're going to do something a little bit different. I just talked about the relative reference, how when you copy that formula over, it looks at the range that was selected before, and then it basically copies that range. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about absolute cell references, but I'm going to demonstrate something, and then we'll go back and we'll talk a little bit more about absolute cell references. So for now, let's look at this. I'm in cell H4, and what I want to do is I'm going to do a little what-if analysis. What if California sold 10% more than what I have here? So if we could just increase our sales by 10%, what would that be right here? So this is a multiplication formula, and what we want to do is we want to use this cell, and we want to use cell H1 in the formula. So I'm going to do equal sign. I'm going to click on cell F4. The multiplication symbol is the asterisk, which is above your number 8 key. And then I'm going to click on cell H1, which is the 10%. And then I'm going to press enter. So just take a minute and look at the formula. It says equal F4 times H1. I press enter. So you can see that if I were to increase my sales by 10% in California, I would have $18.80 more. Now, what if I wanted to know how much 188 plus 1880 is? So I can actually factor that into my formula here. I can just go ahead and with this cell selected, I could come back up here and say, so just so you know, multiplication always takes place first in a formula over addition. So if I type in plus F4, what's going to happen is in this formula, the first thing that will be calculated is F4 times H1. So the first calculation will be how much is F4 times H1? Well, we know that was the $18.80. Now we're saying add that $18.80 back to F4, okay? And I press enter. So it tells me that if I made 10% more, I would have $206.80. Great. So let's say I want to play the what if analysis for each one of these cells here from F5, F6, F7. Now, typically, you just learned that you can copy a formula down, right? But this formula is referencing this cell for H1. And H1, we basically want to make it to where it is absolute so that when I copy this formula down, it continually goes back and looks at cell H1. And that's so that if I want to change this number, let's say from 0.1 to 0.2, 20%, I can just play these little games and my formulas will update. Okay? So just so you can see how this works, if I click on cell H4 and I go up to the formula bar, right where it says H1, click to the right of H1, the way to make this cell absolute is to press the F4 key. So I'm going to press the F4 key on my keyboard, and that is the function key that makes a cell absolute. Now, you can see that that process basically puts a $ before the H and before the number 1, making that cell absolute. You can hand type in your $signs. That would be fine as well. Now I'm going to press enter, and when I go back to this cell, I'm going to autofill it down like so. And I want you to notice that as I click on each one of these cells, H1 is absolute. If I had not made H1 absolute, this cell right here would have looked at H2, this cell would have looked at H3, this cell would have looked at H4, and that would not be what we want. So this is a great feature because then I can come back here and I can play these little guessing games and say, well, what if I increase cells by 30%? And what if I increase cells by 40%? So you could see that it's a great way to work with a what if type of thing. But there's a lot of other uses for absolute cell references as well. Okay, that's where we're going to stop for now, and I'll talk about formulas a little bit more in another video.